The desperate cry of a wedding bell tolling in a nearly empty church echoed through the dusty streets of La Veta, Colorado on a scorching summer day in 1878. Olivia Osborne stood frozen in her wedding dress, tears streaming down her face as the letter in her trembling hands delivered the crushing news. Her fiancé of 2 years wasn't coming. The parchment, hastily scrawled in his familiar handwriting, explained that he'd taken the morning train east with the banker's daughter, leaving Olivia to face the assembled guests alone. "He ain't coming back, is he?" Her father whispered, his weathered hand gently squeezing her shoulder as the whispers behind them grew louder. Olivia couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. 2 years of planning, of dreaming, of building a future all gone with the morning train. The small church that had once felt intimate now seemed to close in around her, the sympathetic glances of friends and family burning into her skin like branding irons. Her mother sobbed quietly in the front pew, while her younger sisters stood awkwardly in their matching bridesmaid dresses, shifting uncomfortably as they watched their older sister's world crumble. "I need air," Olivia finally managed, gathering her elaborate skirts and rushing down the aisle, past the murmuring guests, past the flower arrangements that had cost a month's wages, past the preacher who stood helplessly at the altar. The bright Colorado sunlight hit her face as she burst through the church doors, momentarily blinding her. When her vision cleared, she found herself staring at a tall figure leaning against a hitching post across the street, his face partially obscured by the wide brim of his hat. "Looks like things didn't go as planned in there," the man said, his voice deep and gentle as he straightened, revealing the weathered face of Wade Quincy, a local rancher whose path had crossed with hers only occasionally over the years. Olivia couldn't respond, the humiliation too fresh as she struggled to breathe through her tightly laced corset. Wade crossed the street with long, confident strides, stopping a respectful distance from her. "His loss is my blessing," he said quietly, removing his hat and holding it against his chest. "If you need somewhere to go, my horse is right here." Olivia blinked in disbelief. "Excuse me." Wade's eyes, a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin, met hers without wavering. "A woman deserves better than to be abandoned on her wedding day. I'm offering you a way out of facing all those pitying looks back in there." He gestured toward the church with a tilt of his head. Olivia stared at him, suddenly recognizing the man who had bid extraordinarily high on her apple pies at the last 3 church socials. The quiet rancher who always tipped his hat to her in town, but rarely spoke more than a few words. Behind her, the church door opened, and she heard her mother's tearful voice calling her name. Without thinking, Olivia reached out and took Wade's outstretched hand. "I must be losing my mind," she whispered as he helped her onto his horse. Wade swung up behind her, his strong arms encircling her waist as he took the reins. "Maybe, Miss Osborne, or maybe you're finding it." The commotion behind them grew as Wade urged his horse into a trot, then a gallop, carrying them away from the church and the shattered remains of what should have been the happiest day of Olivia's life. They rode in silence for several miles, the rhythmic hoofbeats against the packed earth the only sound as La Veta faded behind them. The mountains rose majestically in the distance, their peaks still capped with snow despite the summer heat. Olivia's elaborate wedding dress billowed around them both, the delicate lace snagging on Wade's denim pants. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, her voice hoarse from crying. "My sister's place," Wade replied. "She lives about an hour outside of town." "I figured you might need somewhere to collect yourself before facing everyone again." Olivia nodded, grateful for his thoughtfulness. The reality of what she had done running away with a virtual stranger on her wedding day was beginning to sink in, but somehow the steady strength of Wade's presence behind her kept panic at bay. "I don't even know you," she said softly. Wade's chuckle rumbled against her back. "Wade Quincy, madam. 32 years old. Own the Double Q Ranch about 15 miles east of Lavetta. Never been married. Don't drink much except for special occasions. Been sweet on you since I first saw you reading to the children at the schoolhouse 3 years ago." Olivia turned slightly, trying to see his face. "Sweet on me? You hardly ever spoke to me. Some men talk too much. I prefer to let my actions speak." His voice carried no judgment, but Olivia felt the subtle comparison to her former fiancé, Edwin, who had always had pretty words at the ready. They crested a small hill, and a modest homestead came into view. Smoke curled from the chimney of a well-maintained cabin, and a small garden burst with summer vegetables beside it. A woman looked up from hanging laundry as they approached, her expression changing from surprise to concern as she spotted Olivia's wedding dress. "Wade," she called, wiping her hands on her apron as they drew closer. "Rebecca," Wade greeted his sister as he dismounted and helped Olivia down. "This is Miss Olivia Osborne. She's had a difficult day and needs somewhere to rest." Rebecca's kind eyes the same startling blue as her brother's took in Olivia's tear-stained face and disheveled appearance without comment. "Of course. Come inside, dear. I'll heat some water for tea." The next few hours passed in a blur for Olivia. Rebecca provided a simple dress to replace the wedding gown, which now hung like an accusing ghost from a hook in the spare bedroom. Wade disappeared to tend to chores around his sister's property, giving Olivia space to collect herself. By evening, seated at Rebecca's kitchen table with a bowl of hearty stew before her, Olivia finally felt steady enough to consider what had happened and what she would do next. "I need to return to town tomorrow," she said as Rebecca poured coffee. "My family must be frantic." Wade, who had been quietly eating across from her, set down his spoon. "I sent word with a passing rider that you were safe. But yes, I'll take you back whenever you're ready." "My parents will be mortified," Olivia whispered, staring into her coffee cup. "The entire town will be talking about poor Olivia Osborne, left at the altar by Edwin." "Let them talk," Rebecca said firmly, joining them at the table. "In a month, someone else's drama will take its place. That's how small towns work." Wade cleared his throat. "If it helps any, most folks in town never thought Edwin was worthy of you to begin with." "Wade," Rebecca scolded, but Olivia found herself smiling for the first time that day. "It's true," Wade continued, meeting Olivia's gaze. "A man who spends more time at the saloon than working his claim isn't the sort who deserves a woman like you." Olivia's smile faded. "Apparently the banker's daughter disagreed. They're probably halfway to Denver by now." "Then they deserve each other," Wade said simply. "And someday, you'll thank the Lord that Edwin showed his true colors before vows were exchanged rather than after." The simple wisdom in his words penetrated the fog of humiliation and heartbreak that had enveloped Olivia since reading Edwin's letter. Wade was right, better to discover Edwin's faithlessness now than years into a marriage with children to consider. "Thank you," she said softly. "Both of you. I'm not sure what I would have done if you hadn't been there, Mr. Quincy." "Wade," he corrected gently. "And I was there because I'd heard rumors that Edwin might not show. I wanted to be available if you needed a friend." "Rumors?" Olivia's stomach tightened. "How did you know when I didn't?" Wade shifted uncomfortably. "Edwin was seen boarding the eastbound train with Catherine Taylor early this morning. By the time word reached me, the wedding was already set to begin." His eyes held genuine regret. "I'm sorry, Olivia. I wish I could have spared you standing there waiting." The knowledge that others had known of her humiliation before she did brought fresh tears to Olivia's eyes. How many had attended the wedding knowing what was about to happen? How many pitying glances had she missed in her excitement? "I can never go back," she whispered, the enormity of it crashing down on her. "Nonsense," Rebecca said firmly. "You've done nothing wrong. Hold your head high." "Rebecca's right," Wade agreed. "But if you need time, you're welcome to stay here or at my ranch until you're ready to face the town again." Olivia looked between the siblings, moved by their kindness to a virtual stranger. "Why would you do this for me?" Wade's weathered face softened. "Because everyone deserves better than to be abandoned. And because sometimes the good Lord works in mysterious ways, turning heartbreak into opportunity if we're brave enough to see it." The following morning, after a restless night in Rebecca's spare bedroom, Olivia awoke to the sound of horses in the yard. Peering out the window, she was shocked to see her father dismounting beside Wade, both men engaged in serious conversation. Hastily dressing in Rebecca's borrowed clothes, Olivia rushed outside, her heart pounding. "Father!" Thomas Osborne's weathered face broke into relief at the sight of his eldest daughter. "Olivia," he embraced her tightly, "your mother and I have been worried sick, despite Mr. Quincy's message." Olivia clung to her father, embarrassment and love tangling together. "I'm sorry for running off. I couldn't bear to face everyone." Thomas pulled back, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "No one blames you, child. That scoundrel Edwin is the one who should be ashamed." His voice hardened with anger. "If I ever see him again in Lavetta, he'll wish he'd kept running east." Wade stood a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. "I was just explaining to your father that you've been safe here with Rebecca and me." Thomas nodded, his expression softening as he looked at the rancher. "And I'm grateful for that, Quincy. Not many men would have shown such consideration." Olivia glanced between the two men, surprised by her father's easy acceptance of her situation. "You're not angry that I fled the church?" Thomas sighed heavily. "Disappointed that you didn't trust us to support you, perhaps, but angry. No, Olivia, we love you. We only wanted your happiness with Edwin because we thought that's what you wanted." "I did want it," Olivia admitted, the ache in her chest a dull throb now rather than the sharp pain of yesterday. "But perhaps I wanted the idea of him more than the man himself." Her father nodded thoughtfully. "Your mother said something similar last night." He glanced at Wade again. "Mr. Quincy has offered to escort us back to town when you're ready." "I'd like a few more days, if that's possible," Olivia said, surprising herself with the request. "I need time to think about what happens next." Thomas studied his daughter's face for a long moment before nodding. "Very well. I'll tell your mother you're safe and need some time." He turned to Wade. "I'm entrusting my daughter's welfare and reputation to you, Quincy." Wade straightened, his expression solemn. "You have my word, sir. Miss Osborne will be treated with nothing but respect under my roof." "Your roof?" Olivia questioned. "My ranch would offer more privacy than Rebecca's place," Wade explained. "My sister receives visitors, frequently ladies from church, neighbors. At the Double Q, you'd have space to yourself without curious eyes." Thomas seemed to approve of this logic. "The Quincy place is well established and respected. If you're comfortable with the arrangement, Olivia, I believe it would be proper enough with his housekeeper present." The decision made, Olivia found herself once again on horseback with Wade by mid-afternoon, this time riding toward his ranch with a small bag of borrowed clothes from Rebecca, and her wedding dress carefully wrapped in brown paper. Her father had returned to Lavetta to reassure her mother, promising to visit in a few days. The Double Q Ranch spread across a verdant valley, nestled against the foothills of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. A two-story white farmhouse stood proudly among several well-maintained outbuildings, with corrals containing horses of exceptional quality. Unlike many bachelor ranchers who lived in primitive conditions, Wade had clearly invested in creating a proper home. "It's beautiful," Olivia murmured as they approached. "Been working on it for nearly 10 years now," Wade replied, a note of pride in his voice. "Started with nothing but the land and a dream after the war." Olivia looked at him with new interest. "You fought in the war?" Wade nodded, his expression momentarily distant. "Union cavalry, came west afterward looking for peace and wide open spaces, and found them here in Colorado. That I did." His smile returned. "Never regretted it for a day, even during blizzards that nearly froze me solid or droughts that threatened everything I'd built." They were greeted by a plump, elderly woman who emerged from the house wiping her hands on her apron. "Mr. Quincy, didn't expect you back so soon." And with company, no less. "Mrs. Fletcher, this is Miss Olivia Osborne," Wade introduced them as he helped Olivia dismount. "She'll be our guest for a while. Miss Osborne, this is Mrs. Fletcher, my housekeeper and the best cook in 3 counties." The older woman's kind eyes assessed Olivia quickly, taking in the borrowed dress and tired expression. Whatever conclusions she drew, she kept to herself, merely nodding and saying, "The blue room is all made up. I'll fix some refreshments while you get settled." The blue room proved to be a lovely bedchamber on the 2nd floor, with windows overlooking the mountains and simple but quality furnishings that spoke of Wade's prosperity. Olivia stood in the center, suddenly overwhelmed by the strange turn her life had taken in just 24 hours. Yesterday morning, she had been dressing for her wedding, certain of her future as Edwin's wife. Now she was in another man's home, with her reputation dependent on the discretion of strangers and her future completely unwritten. A soft knock at the open door drew her attention. Wade stood there, respectfully remaining in the hallway. "Mrs. Fletcher has tea ready downstairs when you're settled. Take all the time you need." "Thank you," Olivia said, then hesitated. "Mr. Quincy, Wade, I don't know how to repay your kindness." He shook his head. "There's nothing to repay. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns, and we have to trust that there's purpose in them, even when we can't see it yet." Later, after tea with Mrs. Fletcher, who proved to be a discreet and compassionate woman with a talent for making Olivia feel at ease, Wade offered to show her around the ranch. The late afternoon sun bathed the landscape in golden light as they walked side by side, Wade pointing out the various aspects of his operation with evident pride. "I breed and train horses primarily," he explained as they approached a corral where several magnificent animals grazed. "Started with just 2 mares and a stallion, built up from there. Now the Double Q brand is known throughout Colorado and into New Mexico." Olivia watched as a beautiful chestnut mare approached the fence, her intelligent eyes curious. "They're magnificent." "This is Penny," Wade said as the mare pushed her nose against his outstretched hand. "One of my best. She's gentle enough for even an inexperienced rider." "Are you offering to teach me to ride properly?" Olivia asked, surprised. In town, she had only occasionally ridden and always side saddle as befitted a lady. Wade's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "If you're interested, might help pass the time while you're here." Olivia found herself returning his smile, the first genuine one since her world had collapsed yesterday. "I think I'd like that very much." The days that followed established an unexpected rhythm. Each morning after breakfast, Wade would meet Olivia at the stables for a riding lesson. He proved to be a patient teacher, never rushing her progress or making her feel inadequate when she struggled. By the 4th day, he had convinced her to try riding astride rather than side saddle, scandalous by town standards, but practical for ranch life. "You're a natural," he commented as they rode across a meadow bursting with wildflowers, Olivia growing more confident with each passing minute on Penny's back. "Hardly that," she laughed, the sound surprising her. When had she last laughed freely? "But thank you for teaching me. I never realized how exhilarating it could be." In the afternoons, Olivia often helped Mrs. Fletcher with household tasks, finding comfort in the familiar routines of cooking and mending. The elderly housekeeper shared stories of her own youth in Pennsylvania and her journey west as a young bride, helping Olivia see that life's unexpected turns could lead to joy as well as sorrow. "My Albert wasn't my first love, Mrs. Fletcher confided one afternoon as they shelled peas on the back porch. "I was engaged to another man who decided California gold was more tempting than a Pennsylvania wife. Broke my heart at the time." "But you found happiness with Albert?" Olivia asked. Mrs. Fletcher's weathered face softened with memory. 32 wonderful years before pneumonia took him. Would never have happened if that first fellow hadn't left me crying at the stagecoach stop. She patted Olivia's hand. "Sometimes what feels like the end is just the beginning of something better." Evenings were spent in the comfortable parlor, where Wade often read aloud from books while Olivia worked on mending or embroidery. She discovered he had a pleasant voice and excellent taste in literature, favoring both classics and more contemporary works by Twain and Dickens. On the 5th evening of her stay, Olivia's father and mother arrived for dinner. The reunion with her mother was tearful but healing, with Martha Osborne embracing her daughter tightly and assuring her that the scandal in town was already fading. "The Taylors are mortified by Catherine's behavior," Martha reported as they sat in the parlor after an excellent meal prepared by Mrs. Fletcher. "Mr. Taylor has apparently disowned her, and Edwin's claim has been put up for sale. He's not expected to return." "Good riddance," Thomas Osborne muttered, accepting a cigar from Wade. "Olivia, your mother and I have been discussing your future. We want you to know there's no rush for you to return to town until you're ready." "Indeed," Martha agreed. "In fact, Mrs. Peterson at the school mentioned they're still seeking an assistant teacher for the fall term. I took the liberty of suggesting you might be interested." Olivia blinked in surprise. "Teaching? But I always assumed I'd be married, raising a family." "And perhaps you will be one day," her mother said gently. "But in the meantime, you're a smart, educated young woman. The children adore you when you volunteer at the school. Why not consider it?" The prospect of independence, of creating a life beyond the one she'd planned with Edwin, sparked something in Olivia's heart. "I'll think about it." Later that night, after her parents had departed with promises to return in a few days, Olivia found Wade on the front porch, staring at the stars emerging in the twilight sky. "Your parents are good people," he commented as she joined him, maintaining a respectful distance. "Yes," Olivia agreed. "I'm fortunate in that. They've always wanted my happiness above all else." She hesitated, then added, "They seem quite taken with you." Wade's chuckle was soft in the gathering darkness. "Your father spent an hour discussing cattle breeding techniques with me while you and your mother talked. I believe I passed some sort of test." "Is that what that was?" Olivia smiled, leaning against the porch railing. "I was wondering why he insisted on seeing your bull." "A man likes to know his daughter is in good hands." Wade's voice grew more serious. "Are you considering your mother's suggestion about teaching?" Olivia looked out across the darkening landscape, the mountains now just silhouettes against the night sky. "I'm considering many things I never expected to consider a week ago. Such as who I am when I'm not defined by my relationship to someone else." She turned to look at him, finding his eyes steady on her face. I've always been Thomas Osborne's daughter or Edwin's fiancé. Perhaps it's time to discover who Olivia is on her own." Wade nodded slowly. "I think that's wise." He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I think Olivia on her own is someone quite remarkable." Heat rose in Olivia's cheeks at the simple compliment. "You've known me less than a week, Mr. Quincy." "Sometimes a week is enough to recognize quality," he replied with a small smile. "Like a good horse or fine leather." "Are you comparing me to livestock, sir?" Olivia teased, surprising herself with her boldness. Wade's laugh filled the night air. "Perhaps that wasn't the most flattering comparison. Let me try again." His expression grew thoughtful. "You remind me of the mountains, beautiful at first glance, but with depths and strengths that only reveal themselves over time and changing seasons." The poetry of his words caught Olivia off guard. This quiet, serious rancher had layers she was only beginning to glimpse. "That was lovely," she said softly. "Just the truth," Wade replied, his gaze returning to the stars. "Good night, Olivia. Sleep well." As days turned into weeks, Olivia found herself less eager to return to Lavetta. The rhythm of ranch life suited her, and she discovered skills she never knew she possessed. Wade taught her to ride with confidence, to identify the various wild herbs that grew on his land, even the basics of cattle management. Mrs. Fletcher instructed her in the art of preserving the summer's bounty for winter, skills Olivia's town upbringing hadn't provided. Most surprising was her growing attachment to Wade himself. Unlike Edwin, whose charm had always been readily apparent in clever words and grand gestures, Wade's appeal revealed itself gradually through consistent actions and quiet strength. He never pushed for more than friendship, maintaining a respectful distance that Olivia found herself increasingly wishing he wouldn't. One evening, nearly a month after her aborted wedding, Olivia sat on the porch swing watching a spectacular sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. Wade joined her, wordlessly offering a cup of coffee before sitting beside her. "Penny's going to miss you when you return to town," he said after a comfortable silence. "She perks up every time you approach the stable." Olivia's heart skipped. "Are you asking me to leave?" "No," Wade said quickly. "Never that. But your father mentioned yesterday that the school board is eager for your decision. Term starts in 3 weeks. "Ah," Olivia sipped her coffee, gathering her thoughts. "I've been avoiding thinking about it. Because you don't want to teach." "Because I don't want to leave here," she admitted, looking down at her hands. "I've found peace at the double Q that I never expected." Wade was quiet for so long that Olivia finally looked up, finding his eyes intent on her face. "You'd be welcome to stay indefinitely," he said carefully. "But there would be talk." "There's already talk, I'm sure," Olivia sighed. "The jilted bride hiding away at the Quincy ranch." "Does that bother you, what people say?" Olivia considered the question honestly. "It did at first. Now, not as much." "I'm learning that other people's opinions matter less than being true to myself." Wade nodded, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "That's a valuable lesson that takes some folks a lifetime to learn." "What would you do if you were me?" Olivia asked suddenly. Wade set his coffee cup aside, his expression thoughtful. "I'm not sure I'm qualified to advise on a lady's choices." "Try," she urged. He studied the sunset for a moment before answering. "I think you'd make an excellent teacher. The children would be fortunate to have someone with your kindness and intelligence guiding them." He paused. "But I also think there are many ways to build a meaningful life. The question is what calls to your heart." "And if more than one thing calls to me?" Olivia asked softly. Wade's eyes met hers, something unspoken passing between them. "Then perhaps you don't have to choose just one." The following Sunday, Olivia attended church in Lavetta for the first time since her wedding day. Wade escorted her, his solid presence beside her giving her courage as they walked through the doors of the same building where her heart had been broken. The congregation's reaction was mixed. Some offered warm greetings, others whispered behind their hands, and a few, particularly Edwin's relatives, pointedly looked away. "Hold your head high," Wade murmured as they took their seats. "You've done nothing wrong." The service passed in a blur for Olivia, her attention caught between the pastor's sermon on forgiveness and the hyper-awareness of Wade beside her, his shoulder occasionally brushing hers when he shifted in the pew. Afterward, as they stood in the churchyard speaking with her parents, several members of the school board approached. "Miss Osborne, we're delighted to see you back in town," Mrs. Peterson, the head of the board, said warmly. "Have you given any thought to our offer?" Olivia glanced at Wade, who gave her an encouraging nod. "I have, Mrs. Peterson. I would be honored to accept the position with one condition." "And what might that be, dear?" "I'd like to continue living at the Double Q Ranch and ride into town for school days," Olivia said firmly. "Mr. Quincy has generously offered accommodations, and the arrangement would allow me to continue assisting with some aspects of ranch management that I've found quite fulfilling." Mrs. Peterson's eyebrows rose, and she exchanged glances with the other board members. "That's rather unconventional, Miss Osborne." "These are unconventional times, madam," Wade interjected politely. "Miss Osborne has proven herself quite capable in both intellectual and practical matters. I believe the arrangement would benefit both the school and my ranch, and my daughter's reputation." Thomas Osborne asked quietly. "Would be thoroughly protected," Wade assured him. "Mrs. Fletcher continues as my housekeeper, and I've spoken with the pastor about making our arrangement official in the eyes of the community." Olivia's heart stuttered. "Official?" Wade turned to her, his usual confidence giving way to a touch of uncertainty. "If you're amenable, that is. I had planned to speak with you privately, but perhaps this is better." He took her hand in his. "Olivia, I'm not asking for a hasty decision after what you've been through. But I want you to know that my home would be yours for as long as you wish, whether as my guest, my wife, or something in between while you decide what future you want." A murmur went through the gathered crowd, but Olivia barely noticed. All she could see was the honest emotion in Wade's blue eyes and the way he offered her choices rather than demands. "Mr. Quincy," Mrs. Peterson said, breaking the charged silence, "are you proposing to Miss Osborne in my churchyard?" Wade didn't look away from Olivia as he answered. "I believe I'm proposing that Miss Osborne has the right to determine her own path, with the understanding that I'll support whatever she chooses." Something tight in Olivia's chest loosened at his words. This was what had been missing with Edwin, this respect for her as a person with her own dreams and desires. "I accept the teaching position," she said to Mrs. Peterson, then turned back to Wade. "And I accept your invitation to continue staying at the Double Q while I consider your other offer." Wade's smile lit his entire face. "That's all I can ask for." The arrangement proved less scandalous than some had predicted. With Mrs. Fletcher's constant presence at the ranch, the pastor's blessing, and Olivia's parents' open approval, even the most gossipy members of Lavetta society found little to criticize. Olivia rode to town each weekday morning to teach, sometimes accompanied by Wade when his business took him to Lavetta, sometimes alone on Penny, who had become definitively her horse. Teaching brought Olivia unexpected joy. The children responded well to her natural warmth and patience, while the intellectual stimulation of preparing lessons kept her mind engaged. In the afternoons and evenings, she returned to the Double Q, where Wade had built a small office for her to prepare her schoolwork. As autumn painted the landscape in brilliant colors, Olivia and Wade settled into a comfortable routine that blended independence and togetherness. They ate meals as a family with Mrs. Fletcher, rode the ranch boundaries on weekends, and spent evenings by the fire reading or talking. Wade never pressed for a decision about his proposal, content to let their relationship develop naturally. One crisp October afternoon, Olivia dismissed her students early after completing the day's lessons and decided to visit her parents before returning to the ranch. As she approached her childhood home, she was startled to see a familiar figure on the front porch in conversation with her father, Edwin. Olivia's stomach clenched as her former fiancé turned at the sound of her horse approaching. He looked thinner than she remembered, his once immaculate clothes slightly worn at the edges. "Olivia," he called, stepping toward her as she dismounted. "I was just asking your father where I might find you." Thomas Osborne's expression was thunderous. "And I was just telling this young man that he's not welcome on my property." "It's all right, father," Olivia said, surprised by how steady her voice remained. "I can speak with Edwin." Her father frowned but nodded reluctantly. "I'll be right inside if you need me." Once they were alone, Edwin removed his hat, twisting it nervously in his hands. "You look well, Livy. Teaching suits you, that's what folks in town say." "Thank you." Olivia kept her tone neutral. "What brings you back to Lavetta, Edwin? I understood you had relocated permanently." He winced at her formality. "Things didn't work out with Catherine. Her father cut her off when we left, and Denver wasn't what we expected." "I'm sorry to hear that." Olivia was surprised to discover she meant it. Whatever anger she had felt toward Edwin and Catherine had faded during her months at the Double Q. "I came to apologize," Edwin continued, his gaze dropping to his worn boots. "What I did was unforgivable. I was a fool, Livy. I see that now." "Yes, you were," Olivia agreed calmly. "But we all make mistakes." Hope flickered across Edwin's face. "Then perhaps, with time, you might consider giving me another chance. I still care for you, Livy. We could start fresh." For a brief moment, Olivia tried to imagine returning to the future she had once planned with Edwin. The mental image felt wrong, like a dress that no longer fit. "No, Edwin, that's not possible." "Because of Quincy." Edwin's expression darkened. "People are saying you're living at his ranch, that he snatched you up the very day I left." Irritation flared in Olivia's chest. "People say many things, not all of them accurate or kind. Wade offered me friendship and respect when I needed it most. What exists between us now is not something I'm willing to discuss with you." "So it's true then?" Edwin pressed. "You and Quincy are none of your concern," Olivia interrupted firmly. "You gave up any right to question my choices when you left me standing at the altar. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to speak with my parents." Edwin reached for her arm as she turned away. "Livy, please." "I made a terrible mistake. I've lost everything, my claim, my reputation, Catherine. Don't tell me I've lost you too." Olivia gently but firmly removed his hand. "You lost me the moment you decided I wasn't worth keeping your word, Edwin. I wish you well, truly I do, but my future lies elsewhere." The certainty in her voice seemed to finally penetrate. Edwin's shoulders slumped as he nodded slowly. "He's a lucky man, Quincy." "Yes," Olivia agreed, a small smile touching her lips. "But so am I lucky to have found him." After Edwin's departure, Olivia spent an hour with her parents before riding back to the Double Q, her mind unusually clear. The encounter with her former fiancé had crystallized something she'd been feeling for weeks, but hadn't fully acknowledged. She found Wade in the barn, brushing down his stallion after a day spent mending fences on the far side of the property. He looked up as she entered, his face breaking into the warm smile that had become so dear to her. "You're back earlier than I expected," he said, setting aside the brush. "Everything all right at the school?" Edwin returned to Lavetta, Olivia said without preamble. He came to ask for another chance. Wade went very still, his expression carefully neutral. I see. No, I don't think you do, Olivia continued, moving closer until she stood directly before him. Seeing him today made me realize something important. And what might that be? Wade's voice was low, the question cautious. Olivia reached up and placed her palm against his weathered cheek. That sometimes a person doesn't know what they truly want until fate intervenes to show them a different path. She took a deep breath. I'm ready to answer your proposal now, Wade Quincy. His hand covered hers, pressing it more firmly against his face. Are you certain, Olivia? There's no hurry. I've never been more certain of anything, she replied, standing on tiptoe to bring her face closer to his. I want to be your wife. I want to build a life here at the Double Q, teaching the children of Lavetta and helping you with the ranch. I want everything we've created these past months to continue growing into something even more beautiful. The joy that bloomed on Wade's face was breathtaking. Without another word, he leaned down and captured her lips in a kiss that spoke of months of restrained longing finally set free. Olivia's arms twined around his neck as she returned the kiss with equal fervor, her heart soaring with the rightness of their connection. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Wade pressed his forehead against hers. I've been waiting to do that since the moment I saw you run out of that church in your wedding dress. Olivia laughed softly. That was hardly my finest moment. It was the moment that changed everything, Wade countered, his arms tightening around her waist. When I told you his loss was my blessing, I had no idea how true those words would prove to be. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the Double Q Ranch, with only their closest friends and family in attendance. Olivia wore a dress of deep blue rather than white, a conscious choice to mark this union as a new beginning rather than a continuation of what had been interrupted. The school board granted her permission to continue teaching through the remainder of the term, with the understanding that she would train her replacement in the spring, when she and Wade expected their first child, a happy surprise discovered just days before their wedding. On a snowy evening in early December, as they sat before the fire in what was now truly their home, Wade placed a gentle hand on Olivia's still flat stomach. "Are you happy, Mrs. Quincy?" he asked, his voice soft in the quiet room. Olivia covered his hand with her own, thinking of the winding path that had brought her here from heartbreak at the altar to profound joy beside this man who had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she answered truthfully. "Who would have thought that being left at the altar would lead to the greatest blessing of my life?" Wade's kiss was tender as he gathered her close. "Sometimes the Lord's greatest gifts come disguised as our deepest disappointments." As snow fell softly outside their window and the fire crackled in the hearth, Olivia nestled against her husband's strong shoulder, profoundly grateful for the unexpected turn her life had taken. The path she now walked was nothing like the one she had planned. It was infinitely better. Spring arrived at the Double Q with an explosion of wildflowers across the meadows and the birth of Wade and Olivia's son, Thomas Wade Quincy, named for both grandfathers. The baby had his father's startling blue eyes and his mother's gentle temperament, winning the hearts of everyone who met him. Olivia had reluctantly resigned from her teaching position as her pregnancy progressed, but found fulfillment in establishing a small school on the ranch for the children of their workers and neighboring homesteads. 3 days a week, young voices filled the converted bunkhouse as Olivia continued her passion for education while keeping her growing son nearby. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. The Double Q prospered under Wade and Olivia's joint management, with her practical business sense complementing his expertise with the land and animals. They weathered drought years and harsh winters, celebrated bountiful harvests and the birth of their daughter, Rebecca Martha, 2 years after Thomas. Lavetta grew alongside their family, the railroad bringing new prosperity and residents to the once small town. Occasionally, Olivia would encounter someone who remembered her as the bride left at the altar, but those moments grew increasingly rare and ceased to sting. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Wade surprised Olivia with a trip back east to visit Rebecca, who had married a Pennsylvania businessman the previous year. While Thomas and little Becca stayed with their grandparents, Wade and Olivia enjoyed 2 weeks of uninterrupted time together, rediscovering aspects of their relationship that the demands of ranch life and parenting sometimes overshadowed. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if Edwin had shown up that day?" Wade asked one evening as they strolled through a Philadelphia park, far from the rugged beauty of Colorado. Olivia considered the question seriously. "Sometimes, but not with regret, more with curiosity. I suspect we would have had a conventional life that neither made me particularly happy nor particularly sad." "And our life is unconventional?" Wade asked with a smile. "Wonderfully so," Olivia confirmed, squeezing his hand. "How many ranchers' wives teach school and keep the account books? How many husbands encourage their wives to pursue their own interests alongside family responsibilities? We've created something special, Wade." "Indeed we have, Mrs. Quincy," he agreed, pulling her close for a kiss that still held all the passion of their earliest days together. "And it all began with a letter, a runaway bride, and a cowboy waiting outside." By their 10th anniversary, the Double Q had expanded to include prime grazing land that once belonged to neighboring ranches. Wade's breeding program had produced horses sought after throughout the West, and Olivia's small school had grown into a proper educational institution with 2 additional teachers. Their family had grown as well, with the addition of twins James and Josephine, now 3 years old and into everything. Thomas, at 9, was his father's shadow, already showing an affinity for horsemanship and ranch management. 7-year-old Rebecca preferred books to horses, often found in her mother's classroom helping younger children with their reading. The morning of their anniversary dawned clear and bright, a perfect Colorado autumn day. Wade slipped out of bed before sunrise, leaving Olivia sleeping peacefully. He had planned this day for weeks, arranging for Mrs. Fletcher, now semi-retired but still a cherished part of their household, to manage the children while he took Olivia on a special outing. When Olivia awoke, she found a blue cornflower on her pillow, the same wildflower Wade had picked for her on their first ride together around the Double Q. Smiling, she dressed quickly and found her husband in the kitchen, a packed basket waiting on the table. "Happy anniversary, my love," he greeted her with a kiss. "Are you ready for an adventure?" Olivia eyed the basket curiously. "What are you planning, Wade Quincy?" "A day that's just for us," he replied. "Mrs. Fletcher has the children well in hand, and Foreman Jenkins knows what needs doing today. You and I are going to remember how this all began." They rode out as the sun cleared the mountains, Olivia still on Penny, now an elderly but still spirited mare, and Wade on his newest stallion. He led them along familiar trails that gradually became less familiar, until they emerged at a hidden valley Olivia had never seen before, despite a decade of exploring the ranch's expanses. A small cabin stood beside a clear stream, smoke curling from its chimney. Wildflowers carpeted the surrounding meadow, and aspen trees shimmered gold in the autumn sunlight. "Wade, what is this place?" Olivia asked, dismounting as they reached the cabin. "Newly acquired," Wade explained, helping her down. "The Henderson property came with this hunting cabin. I've spent the last month fixing it up." He opened the door, revealing a cozy interior with a fireplace, comfortable furnishings, and windows that captured the magnificent view. "It's lovely," Olivia said, stepping inside. "But why keep it a secret?" Wade wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Because sometimes, even people who love their family as much as we do need a place that's just theirs. Somewhere to remember who they were before they were ma and pa to 4 demanding children." Olivia turned in his embrace, deeply touched by his thoughtfulness. "You never cease to amaze me, Wade Quincy." "That's my intention," he replied with a grin, "to keep amazing you for at least another 50 years. They spent the day in perfect contentment, fishing in the stream, sharing the picnic Wade had packed, and reminiscing about the journey that had brought them together. As evening approached, they sat on the cabin's small porch, wrapped in a blanket against the growing chill, watching the sunset paint the valley in gold and crimson. "You remember what you said to me that day outside the church?" Olivia asked, leaning against Wade's solid chest. "His loss is my blessing," Wade quoted softly. "I meant every word even then, though I had no idea how thoroughly you would transform my life." Olivia tilted her face up to his. "I was so lost that day, humiliated, heartbroken. I couldn't imagine a future beyond the shame of being abandoned." "And now," Wade prompted, his fingers gently stroking her hair, now streaked with a few strands of silver that she refused to disguise. "Now I understand that what I thought was an ending was actually the beginning of the most beautiful story I could have imagined," Olivia replied. "Our story." As stars appeared in the darkening sky above their private valley, Wade sealed her words with a kiss that held a decade of shared memories and the promise of many more to come. What had begun in heartbreak had blossomed into a love story more profound than either could have dreamed, proving once again that sometimes life's greatest disappointments truly are blessings in disguise. 15 years after that fateful day at the church, Lavetta held a grand celebration for its founding anniversary. The town had grown considerably, with the railroad bringing prosperity and new residents. The Quincy family, now one of the most respected in the county, played a central role in the festivities. Wade, distinguished now with silver at his temples but still strong and vital at 47, served on the town council. Olivia, her beauty matured but undiminished at 41, directed the educational committee that had established Lavetta's first proper high school the previous year. Their children, Thomas, now 14, and preparing to attend college in Denver, Rebecca, 12, and already showing her mother's gift for teaching, and the 9-year-old twins with their father's adventurous spirit were woven into the fabric of the community. The celebration featured a parade down Main Street, followed by speeches, games, and a grand dance in the newly constructed town hall. As Olivia stood watching the festivities, a familiar yet unexpected figure approached through the crowd. "Mrs. Quincy." Edwin greeted her politely, his hat in his hands. He had aged more than the years warranted, his once handsome face lined with the evidence of a harder life than he had anticipated. "Mr. Lancaster," Olivia returned with a genuine smile. "I heard you had returned to Colorado. How are you finding Lavetta after all this time?" "Changed," he admitted, glancing around at the bustling town square. "For the better, it seems. Your husband's influence, I'm told." "Wade has contributed, certainly," Olivia acknowledged, "but progress comes from many hands working together." Edwin nodded, his expression wistful as he watched Wade approach with Thomas, both laughing at some shared joke. "I wanted to thank you, Olivia. Thank me, whatever for not hating me," he said simply. "I deserved your hatred for what I did. Instead, you've always been cordial on the rare occasions our paths have crossed. It's more than I warranted." Olivia studied the man she had once believed would be her husband, feeling nothing but a gentle compassion for him now. "Hatred serves no purpose, Edwin. What happened between us led us both to the lives we were meant to have." "Your life, perhaps," Edwin said with a rueful smile. "I'm not sure my wandering path was quite so divinely ordained." "We all make choices," Olivia replied softly, "but it's never too late to find purpose." Wade reached them then, his arm slipping naturally around Olivia's waist as he nodded cordially to Edwin. "Lancaster, glad you could make the celebration." "Wouldn't miss it," Edwin replied, something like respect in his eyes as he looked at the man who had claimed the life he had discarded. "Your boy tells me he's headed to Denver College next fall. You must be proud." "Very," Wade confirmed, his hand tightening slightly on Olivia's waist, not from jealousy, she knew, but from the shared joy of their son's accomplishments. Music began playing from the bandstand, and Wade turned to Olivia with a questioning smile. "Would you honor me with this dance, Mrs. Quincy?" "Always," she replied, placing her hand in his. As Wade led her away, Edwin called after them softly, "You were right, Quincy, all those years ago." Wade paused, looking back questioningly. "Your blessing," Edwin clarified, his expression resigned but peaceful. "The best thing I ever did for Olivia was to leave her standing there that day." Wade considered this for a moment before nodding once. "On that, Lancaster, we agree completely." On the dance floor, Wade gathered Olivia close, moving with the easy grace that still surprised those who knew him only as a rugged rancher. "Happy," he murmured against her temple. Olivia looked around the room at their thriving community, their beautiful children, and finally back to the man who had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. "Perfectly," she assured him. "More with each passing year." As they swayed to the music surrounded by friends and family, Olivia reflected on the long, winding path that had led her here. From the devastation of abandonment at the altar to the rich, fulfilling life, she now led a life made possible by a cowboy who had been waiting outside the church on the worst day of her life, ready to turn her heartbreak into blessing. "What are you thinking about so intently?" Wade asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. Olivia smiled up at him, her heart still quickening at the love she saw reflected in his eyes after all these years. "I'm thinking that sometimes the end of one dream is simply the beginning of a better one we couldn't even imagine for ourselves, until fate stepped in to show us the way." Wade's answering smile was tender as he drew her closer. "And sometimes, that better dream waits just outside the church door, ready to sweep you away to the life you were always meant to live." "Our life," Olivia whispered, resting her head against his chest where she could hear the steady beating of his heart, the heart that had recognized her worth from the very beginning. "Our life," Wade agreed, pressing a kiss to her forehead as they continued to dance, surrounded by the community and family they had built together, their shared journey still unfolding with each passing day. And Olivia knew, with absolute certainty, that being left at the altar had indeed been the greatest blessing of her life, for it had led her directly into the arms of the man she was truly meant to love, and into a life richer and more fulfilling than anything she could have imagined on that fateful day when everything seemed lost. Instead, it had been just the beginning of everything found.